This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
You're extremely welcome to the Institute of International European Affairs. Delighted to see you. We know you've had a very hectic schedule, but met lots of key people, and we're really thrilled that you could find time to come to the Institute. The Commissioner will speak to us for about 15 or 20 minutes on the subject of the Global Gateway Strategy, and then she has kindly agreed to take questions and comments, but she has a hard cut-off at about 3:45, has to go to the airport. So I hope we'll be able to cover a lot of interesting ground in that period. The Commissioner, let me first ask the Director General of Irish Aid to say a few words of introduction. The lecture series of which your contribution is part is called the Development Matters series and is sponsored by Irish Aid. The Institute works very closely with Irish Aid. So, Michael, would you be good enough to say a few words? Thank you very much.
Very much, David. Welcome, Commissioner. I just was saying, David said Michael would say a few words, and then he proceeded to say my few words. So, because I will keep it very short. This lecture series that we work with the IIEA on is really important for us, and I think that's shown especially today with the engagement participation of Commissioner Urpilainen. We have worked together with the Commissioner and her colleagues for quite a while to make this visit happen, and we are really, really pleased that she's been able to come today. It's been a very hectic schedule for her, although I suspect that all the Commissioners' schedules are hectic like this. I would just say Ireland's commitment to the European Union is without doubt. We don't without question. But as I've said before here, the reason that we have as Ireland an official development assistance or official international development programme is because we joined the European Economic Community back in 1973, along with Denmark and another country, the United Kingdom. But that was the origins of our international development programme. And I hope the Commissioner can see that from her discussions today with the Taoiseach and with Minister Fleming, that our international development programme is no longer what is a simple aid programme. It's a central element of Ireland's foreign policy. And it is also a central issue for our engagement with Europe. We are now net contributors to the budget, and it is really important to us that our contribution to the European Development Cooperation budget is one that helps, that gives us some influence and helps us to focus especially on poverty, food insecurity, and the furthest behind first. So we are really, really delighted to have the Commissioner here today, and especially to have her focus on Global Gateway. It's a complex and crisis-ridden world, and Europe's offer to the developing world is one which has to change to meet circumstances. And I know that many of you and many here have questions to ask about the development of Global Gateway, and nobody better than Commissioner Urpilainen, who's been in this international partnerships job since 2019, to address those issues and answer those questions. So I just want to say, Commissioner, you're incredibly welcome to Ireland. We're sorry our Aer Lingus pilots have made your stay a little shorter than otherwise, but we're very glad that other pilots ensured you got here. Thank you.
So very briefly, the Commissioner served as a member of the Finnish Parliament from 2003 to 19, and in 2008 you became the first woman leader in the Social Democratic Party of Finland. From 2000 anyway, for a couple of years you served as the Deputy Prime Minister, as we know, and as the Finance Minister. And during that time, you became closely involved with development issues, which we were delighted to see. And that meant that when you were nominated as Finance Commissioner, that you were extremely well qualified to move into to develop that interest and to represent the EU's interest in that. A couple of housekeeping points. For those of you in the room, please raise your hand if you want to ask a question or a comment, and we will come to you with a roving mic. For those of you who are listening online, please indicate by using the Q&A function, and you'll see that on your screens. Please feel free, this is to anybody, to join the discussion on Twitter using the handle @IIEA and the hashtag Development Matters. And we're also live streaming the event today, so a very warm welcome to those who are joining us via YouTube. With that, Commissioner, over to you. We're looking forward very much to what you have to say.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Indeed, this is a visit which we have been preparing for some time. So I have to say that I'm very pleased, first of all, to be in Ireland, to be in Dublin, but also I'm very pleased to address the Institute of International and European Affairs here in Dublin. I think here at the Institute, you really provide a forum for debate, discussion, and innovation. And of course, through your studies, you also provide and propose policy solutions to the world's most pressing challenges. And unfortunately, today, as we all know, the world faces not only one or even two, but multiple crises. I think we are experiencing a level of tension and polarity not seen since the end of the Cold War. And in this polar crisis context, how can we achieve a more sustainable future? I think this is at least a question I'm asking myself. And I have to say that the European Union's answer to this question is our 300 billion euro Global Gateway strategy, which I will introduce to you shortly. But first, let me take a closer look at the context behind it, the new paradigm in international relations. I'm a former teacher also, so I thought that maybe it's always good to describe the context and then go to the very concrete initiatives and strategies. So, as they say, reality can sometimes be stranger than fiction. And when I took up my role as Commissioner for International Partnerships in the European Commission 5 years ago, to be very honest, I never thought I would see war return to European soil. I say this also coming from Finland. Yet today, Russia's brutal attack on Ukraine continues. Meanwhile, the war in Gaza is unfortunately escalating. The Taliban have returned to power in Afghanistan, and military coups have multiplied in Africa. Then there was the pandemic. COVID-19 not only claimed lives, but also destroyed economies. And it continues to take an economic toll. Because today, more than half of low-income countries are in debt distress or at high risk of it. Climate change has also accelerated, wreaking havoc around the world. It continues to hit the poorest countries the hardest, those least responsible for it, and also, unfortunately, least equipped to respond. As you know, these crises are not isolated. Instead, they occur against a backdrop of long-term challenges and trends. If we look at the global demographics, global demographics continue to shift. In 1890, Europe was 25% of the world population. Today, it is less than 10%. New manufacturing and economic centers have emerged. Digitalization is progressing at high speed, but so are the divides it creates. Those of us old enough to remember the Cold War can recall that geopolitically, it was simpler time. An Iron Curtain divided Europe, and two superpowers competed for global dominance. By contrast, today we are living in a more complex, I would say complex world. The new multipolar relations paradigm, the new international relations paradigm is multipolar. New global powers are emerging or re-emerging, and today's world is both hyper-competitive and hyper-connected, with deeply integrated links in trade, but also in financial markets. A world where supply chains can easily be disrupted or weaponized, even weaponized, which we see, for instance, in Ukraine, but also some other part of the world. A world where Russia and others seek to extend their influence, push alternative governance models, and undermine Europe. This is their main aim, to break the hegemony of the West, including Europe and the US. So in the new international relations paradigm, geopolitics and geoeconomics have become intertwined. And countries around the world must respond. And this actually brings me to my second point. Europe's answer to this paradigm shift is our Global Gateway strategy, which seeks to boost resilience for the EU and partner countries alike. Launched by President von der Leyen in 2021, Global Gateway supports smart, clean, and secure links in the digital, energy, and transport sector. And it helps strengthen health, education, and research systems across the world. So we want to accelerate green and digital transitions in our partner countries. To increase impact, we deploy a collective approach called Team Europe. It not only brings together the resources and expertise of the EU institutions, but also its 27 member states, including Ireland, their development finance institutions, the European Investment Bank, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It also seeks to mobilize the private sector. We also leverage EU funds to take some of the risk out of investment. Through a mixture of grants, concessional loans, and guarantees, we attract private sector investments to the countries that need it most. Now, as with any large transformational strategy, it begs the question, what does Global Gateway mean in practice? At its core, Global Gateway is about high-quality partnership. So we seek to understand our international partners' goals for the future and how EU values intersect with them. We seek to create links, not dependencies, and to really offer truly comprehensive partnership, not just hard infrastructure, but also the regulatory support, technology transfer, and local job creation to make investments last. For example, a little bit over 2 years ago at 2022 EU-AU Summit, African leaders emphasized the need for strategic autonomy in vaccine and pharmaceutical production, not just to cope with COVID-19, but also malaria and other infectious diseases. Currently, Africa imports over 99% of its vaccines and 94% of its medicines. So Africa is completely dependent on import in terms of vaccines and medicines. So through a 1 billion euro Global Gateway initiative, European and African partners, including innovation champion BioNTech, are bringing new technologies to the continent. Critical mRNA vaccines have already been produced in South Africa, and state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities are taking shape in Rwanda, and with Ghana and Senegal poised to follow. Our efforts focus on cultivating the right environment for both the production and uptake of health products and innovations. This spans everything from partnering with universities on skill development. We have to educate a lot of new workforce, nurses, laboratory workers, but also doctors, researchers. But in addition to that, we are also working with African regulators on timely market authorization of new products. As African vaccine and medicine manufacturing picks up pace, we will work to strengthen broader health systems and access to care, ensuring better health and well-being for all. So this vaccine production, medicine production initiative, it's very much linked to our aim and objective to support healthcare, basic healthcare systems and primary healthcare systems in Africa. Another example of Global Gateway in action, Namibia. Namibia has world-class solar and wind resources and holds 30% of the minerals necessary for the green transition. It has embarked on a path for green industrialization and aims to become a global front runner in renewable energy. This is the political objective. Meanwhile, the EU seeks to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. That's the political commitment made by the Ursula von der Leyen's Commission, but very much supported by our member states. And Europe needs alternative energy resources to support the green transition in Europe. Last year, the EU and Namibia signed a partnership agreement that aims to decarbonize economies and create jobs in both our regions. Today, it's taking shape in a 1 billion euro partnership investments. At the first EU-Namibia Business Forum last year, we brought together government and finance stakeholders to help create partnerships to expand green hydrogen production, develop new products, and support a Namibia-based industry for raw materials. We are also collaborating to meet environmental, social, and governance standards, and we are offering training and skill development so that all Namibians can benefit from the job opportunities created by green industrialization. So, Our aim is really to create local and national value. We don't only want to extract minerals and export them to Europe. We also want to support Namibia to industrialize its society, really to create also local and national value. And this is highly appreciated by our Namibian counterparts and partners. The EU is already partnering with the African Union to promote regional economic integration. We know that from our own experience from Europe. From the beginning, the European Union was about economic integration. So the African Continental Free Trade Area opens access to the largest free trade area in the world. And in the past 7 years, we have allocated more than 400 million euros to help it take shape. In terms of dairy, for instance, we want to foster public-private sector partnerships with EU companies who have the expertise to help develop the sector in Nigeria, while having the capacity to provide support and offtake to local producers. And this would not only benefit Nigeria, but the entire continent. It would reduce Africa's dependency on imports, create jobs, promote nutrition and food security, and increase Africa's share of the global economy. As I said, this partnership is still in the early stages, so stay tuned also in Ireland, where you have a lot of expertise on nutrition, of course, on agriculture in general. But I hope that actually these couple of examples give a sense of depth and breadth of Global Gateway partnerships and what makes them unique. So Global Gateway is not only investing in our hard infrastructure, it's much more. It's really a transformative change which we try to provide through these investments, but also through this partnership, focusing on technical assistance, capacity building, training, skills, education, and so forth. Dear friends, earlier I referred to the Puli crisis confronting the world. The dictionary defines Puli crisis as the simultaneous occurrence of several catastrophic events. And I have to say that even on paper, it's frightening. The reality is far worse. In such times, it can be easy to throw up our hands, to think, what can we do? But based on my experience, I have to say that I'm even more convinced now than I was when I started as a commissioner, that we can do a lot and we must do a lot. More than halfway to 2030, the world is on track to deliver around 15% of the Sustainable Development Goals. Only 15%. So we need to adopt a new approach. And this is, dear friend, this is the idea behind the Global Gateway. Ireland is already partnering with the EU on 26 Team Europe initiatives. So together we are having an impact in countries across the globe. Of course, one of the reasons why I am here in Ireland today, I look forward to deepening our partnership with Ireland when it takes up to the presidency of the Council of the EU in 2026. Then you are the one who is really in the driving seat. So through collaboration, we can pave the way for a successful UN summit of the future. I think it's bit our obligation and duty as Europeans also to pave the way to restore faith in multilateralism. we believe in international rule-based order. And I think that we can really uphold the values we hold most dear. As some of the foremost thought leaders and development experts, I believe that also you here in Ireland, you can and hopefully you will help lead the way. So thank you very much and very much looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Fascinating overview of what the Gateway strategy is about, but also the wider international context. I took particular comfort from a number of things you said about the thrust of the strategy, the idea that it's not purely about infrastructure, that it goes much further. And so I take it, therefore, that it is aligned very fully with the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. So that was encouraging to hear. I'd like to open the floor now for questions, comments, obviously for anyone in the audience and also people online. Thank you.
Simon Murphy is my name. I work for LOCUS, which is the alliance of NGOs, international NGOs. I think you can put in that some of our members earlier, so I won't try and go into too much detail. But I think that, as you know, you're in a country here beyond civil society, but a country right across this area that cares deeply about what we call the people who are furthest behind. We have taken that SDG value very much part here. So in the context of Global Gateway, there's also the cuts that we expect to come to the development instrument. How can we make sure that what we've called the differentiated approach is followed, that protects people, particularly in contexts of conflict or fragile conflicts? That's something that we care very deeply about here. That's the first question, if I may. And then the second part would be, in the emphasis in the Global Gateway on the private sector, on services and infrastructure, how can we also protect the public sphere, what we might refer to as the commons? And when you talk about healthcare services and the climate change technologies, we would be interested in your views on technology transfer. For example, I'd like to have to protect public ownership of those public goods that way. And thinking of you as someone with a background as a social democrat in that side of the fence as well as the private sphere, we'd be very interested in those areas in the context of the SDGs, how we're going to achieve that, how we're going to bridge the gaps that you referred to.
Thanks, Simon. We might take a couple of others and then give the Commissioner a chance to respond. Yes, please.
I was wondering, back in 1975, which incidentally we said 2 years after Ireland joined the EU, the Rome Convention was signed between ACP and the European countries. Now, I was wondering if there is a connection with the Gateway program as it is now. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. It was very, very interesting indeed. I have a question just about the Global Gateway and EU external action. You've mentioned that it is a crucial instrument now of EU external action. But with democracy in decline around the world and indeed in the EU, and possibly affecting the EU's clout internationally, I wondered, do you feel that this in fact is a challenge to the foreign policy rationale underpinning the Global Gateway? Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner, would you like to tackle those?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. And what I actually tried to describe in my speech was this this paradigm shift or paradigm change. To be very honest, our partners in the global south, they don't want to be subject of aid. They want to be actors themselves. They want to stand by their own feet. They want to choose with whom they are partnering with. And they didn't like this kind of donor-recipient relationship where the Europeans come and they impose and they tell what we expect the recipients of our aid to do. And that's why I, as a commissioner, but also the EU, we wanted to change the paradigm. We wanted to create equal, mutually beneficial partnerships where, of course, we want to support our partners in their sustainable development because this is the policy framework which we are committed to as an international community. So we are committed to Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals. But in order to succeed in that, we understood also that we need to engage much more with private sector. Because with only public resources, we cannot achieve sustainable development goals. I say this also as a former finance minister myself. This is a reality. The demands and needs are so enormous. Only in Africa, 3 times more inhabitants, citizens than we have in Europe. In Africa, 1.3 billion citizens, 70% of them are below 35 years old. If we look at the forecast for the future, by 2050, in Africa, there will be 6 times more citizens than we have in European Union. 2.5 billion citizens. And most of them are still children and teenagers and young people. So, still, half of the citizens in Africa don't have access to electricity. Many of them, they don't have access to education, or if they have access to education, the quality of education is so poor that I was in Mozambique 10 days ago, where half of the pupils in primary school are graduating from the primary school, only half of the pupils, because of the quality. So taking into account all these challenges and the volume and the size of these challenges, we have to be able to mobilize more resources for Agenda 2030. And that's why the one new element of our paradigm shift is that we have to work more closely, be more united as Europeans. So we have to work as a one team, member states, our development agencies, our European Commission, but also we have to attract and encourage our companies to invest in our partner countries. Because only with public resources, we cannot accelerate green and digital transitions, which are very much needed in Africa in order to enable people to access electricity, for instance. So when it comes to fragile contexts and fragile countries, of course, we understand that when it comes to Afghanistan or when it comes to many Sahelian countries in West Africa, Global Gateway is not the right tool for these countries in these circumstances. And that's why we use different tools in order to support the citizens of those societies and countries in their needs. For instance, in Afghanistan, we have provided almost every year around 200 million euros financial support to the citizens of Afghanistan, although We don't recognize Talibans. We don't engage with Talibans, but we are providing support to the population via UN agencies, WHO. We work with World Food Programme. We work with UNICEF in order to provide access to healthcare and education services, also very much food security, in a close cooperation with our humanitarian partners, so DG ECHO in the Commission and of course also different humanitarian actors on the ground. It's very much same in Sahel. We saw military coups in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali recently. We don't work with those military authorities, but we still keep our promises to the population, to the citizens. So we work through the civil society organizations, through NGOs, also through UN agencies, in order to provide support in health, in education, in food security. So this is part of our commitment to the citizens, to leave no one behind. Maybe in the future, of course, it depends how things are developing in those countries. There are also opportunities for Global Gateway. We know that there are still a couple of projects in West Africa which we started before the coup took place, and we try to continue those projects. But I think it's important to recall that Global Gateway is not the only approach the European Union is offering to our partners. But most of our partners are very interested in Global Gateway because they see that this is very much beneficial also from their point of view. So they are very, I would say, interested in, and there is a lot of buy-in in our partners. Technology transfer, we are supporting, for instance, technology transfer hub under the WHO in South Africa, very much funding that. And I think this whole aim of Global Gateway, not to create new dependencies, because we want our partners to be more self-reliant, more independent. We don't want them to be dependent on us. We want them to be more autonomous. So the whole idea is, of course, through this vaccine production, medicine production initiatives, really to bring them technology, to support them to start to produce their own medicine and vaccines, of course, with the help of our companies and our technology. Samoa Agreement, that's the so-called post-Cotonou Agreement, which we signed finally last November in Samoa in the Pacific. I was the chief negotiator for that. So that's, there first we have Lome, then we have Cotonou, and now we have Samoa. So that's the new agreement we signed with the OACP's countries, so with 79 countries. And actually, this is a new policy framework for our cooperation with Africa, with the Pacific and the Caribbean countries. We launched our regional protocol for Caribbean little bit over 1 month ago when I was in Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. We will launch our Pacific protocol in August in Dogo, where I'm traveling to. And in the autumn, we plan to launch our regional protocol under the Samoa Agreement with African partners. So this is, I would say, this is like the policy framework where we define our values, different principles of our cooperation with the OACP's countries. Then the last point, I think, if you allow me to share my concern with you here in Dublin today, I think if we look at Africa, Europe is still the biggest ODA provider. We are still the biggest trading partner. We are still the biggest investor in Africa. But if you ask citizens in Africa, in several African countries, and we have done also certain surveys, people, this normally ordinary citizens, they don't recognize that. And I think we have to be more visible. We have to be more tangible in our project so that also the citizens, they see that what is the value, what is the benefit, of our partnership from their point of view. But if I look at the discourse and debates currently in Europe, I don't know if that's the case in Ireland, but that's definitely the case in my own country, Finland. But I would say in general, many European member states, it's very much focused on defense and security. And I understand that. I never thought that I would see a war in our continent in my lifetime again. Unfortunately, there is one. And it means that we have to focus more on our own defense, our common defense, our military capabilities, defense industry, and so forth. But what is important, and this is a bit my concern, is that while we are investing in our own security, we cannot turn our back to the rest of the world. So Russia is a threat, a security threat for Europe at the moment. But there are also other security threats we are facing, like climate change, terrorism, migration, pandemics. And all these security threats actually require international cooperation in order to address them. We cannot fight climate change only, focusing on Europe. We have to engage partnerships. We have to engage with other partners and create partnerships in order to succeed. So that's why we have to have a balanced approach. We have to invest in our own security within Europe, but at the same time, we have to also invest in our development cooperation. We have to increase our ODA. We have to invest in our external relations and international partnerships in order to address also, the broader spectrum of security challenges. Otherwise, if we do so that we cut our ODA, if we cut our international cooperation budgets, if we withdraw our presence, close down embassies, which some of the member states are doing from the world, we might end up in the future, let's say in 5 to 10 years, where Europe is, in terms of defense, much more secured, but in terms of geopolitics, much more weaker and isolated. And I don't think that that kind of scenario actually would be beneficial for Europeans and for Europe. So that's why I think that, and that's why I'm so strong advocate also for the Global Gateway, that we have to offer, we need to have a positive offer for our international partnerships, and we need to invest in that. If we turn inwards, I don't think that the future of Europe will be very positive.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Let me first pay a compliment to Finland. In case anyone doesn't know it, Finland is leading the world at the moment in terms of implementation of the SDGs, according to the latest rankings, and that's extremely impressive. So that shows that in Finland, at least, they are still looking to the outside world and looking to all the challenges facing humanity, and not merely to those of security and defence. I just have one quick question of my own, and then I want to bring in a question from Michael Doyle online. My own question is just, how are you finding the current investment climate? Are the private investors whom you want to bring in as partners, are they actually responding to the invitation represented by the Global Gateway, or is there a slightly more cautious atmosphere because of the fact that, frankly, multilateral solutions are not experiencing their finest hour at the moment. We have a lot of division, conflict is distracting attention. I'm just wondering, what's the overall business response to the invitation represented by the Gateway? The question from Michael Doyle then is, in taking forward the Global Gateway Programme, what lessons, if any, has the EU drawn from China's experience with its earlier Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, regarding the first question, I think there is a lot of appetite, a lot of interests among, business community in Europe. I have visited almost all the member states. Always when I travel, I have this kind of a principle that I meet civil society representatives, I meet youth and young people, but I also meet business sector representatives, because I want to understand also in our partner countries that how do they assess, the business environment, what are the biggest obstacles in order to attract investments in those countries. So I would say that my general feeling is that this initiative is very much welcomed by European companies and business community. For some countries, including I learned for Ireland, this is a new way of working that you traditionally have not, combined your ODA and trade and business links. And I respect it, and I fully understand also the background of it. I have to say that as a politician, to explain my background, I have also, not changed my mind, but I think I have seen new opportunities, how we can actually use ODA for the enabling, to support and develop the enabling environment. So my very strong political commitment for the ODA is really to use that for education, which it's my personal priority. I increased our funding to education from 7% to 13%. So when I started as commissioner, only 7% of our funding went to education. Now it's 13%. So I almost doubled that. I think ODA is very much needed for health, basic services, social protection, capacity building, technical assistance, these kind of issues. But then, with ODA money, we cannot really do a lot in terms of, hard infrastructure investments. Of course, we can use our budget as an incentive for companies. We can give, for instance, guarantees for the National Development Agency or institutions so that they can work with companies, provide loans, but it's very limited. And that's why I think we need to get also these, private companies on board. We need to attract European companies to invest in energy sector, in transport, in digital, in those countries. And I was very delighted to learn that Ireland is now preparing its Africa strategy. So I think that would maybe pave a way for the discussions and conversations also between different stakeholders in Ireland, academics, civil society organizations, but also business community. Because I think you have also a lot to offer. You have a lot of expertise in terms of renewable energy, in terms of digital, in terms of education. But how to work as a team, first in Ireland, and then to be part of the Team Europe at the European level, to also scale up, these different innovations and investments. I think this is very much what the Global Gateway is about. What is the difference comparing to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative? There are a lot of different kind of offers, different global players and actors are offering for our partners. How I see the European offer. It's positive offer, which does not want to create dependencies. Unfortunately, we know that through the Belt and Road Initiative, China has enabled many of our partner countries to invest in hard infrastructure, in ports, in railways, in stadiums, and so forth. But what is the outcome of that partnership? Very, very high debt levels. So that we have countries in Africa which face the reality that 70% or 16%, 60 or 70% of their revenues actually goes to debt servicing. So there is a huge dependency on China because of these investments. And what is the aim of the Global Gateway is not to create dependency, but really support the independency and self-reliance of those countries. So as I said, we bring European companies, we invest in enabling environment, but we always want to create also local and national value. So we want to support our partners to industrialize their own societies, boost the economic growth, create more opportunities for young people, create jobs and so forth. So of course, we also respect high quality standards when it comes to human rights, when it comes to social standards and environmental standards. So sometimes I'm accused that Europe has too many conditions and principles, but I always tend to say that the European Union is only operating with its taxpayers' money. That's the money we have. We get it from our taxpayers. And because of that, we have to stick our values. We have to stick also to the principles of the European Union. So human rights, rule of law, democracy. Because we have to be accountable and we have to be able to explain to our citizens how their money is used and what is the outcome of the different cooperation and partnerships, so that citizens here in Ireland, but in the rest of the Europe, they know that, okay, the money is used for good purposes, also based on our values. Yeah.
That's an excellent note on which to end, Commissioner. Thank you very, very much for a fantastic presentation of the strategy and the generosity with which you answered the questions, and there's a lot more we could have covered, but your time is short. We really appreciate you coming to us. Hope to see you again in whatever capacity in future, and we wish you well with the implementation of the strategy. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.